Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Healing. I'm Wayne Jonas, and it's my great pleasure to be able to have this conversation with Dr. Larissa McAllister, who, in my opinion, is probably the, if not one of the lead, if not the world's leading expert in what I like to say, for short, is optimal healing environments. And how do you create an optimal healing environment? She is a visionary, a researcher, an architect, a speaker, and a writer, founder of her own business that helps organizations use the physical environment to improve pretty much everything in their life in those areas. I've worked with Larissa for many, many years and have seen her literally transform spaces into things that improve people's lives in all levels. So, Larissa, it's a great pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Wayne. So excited to be here today.
Great. I think it was Churchill who said, and we'll update this language, but I think at the time he said, man makes buildings and then buildings make man. He was commenting on the fact that we create a physical environment, we build a building, and then for the rest of our life, and sometimes for generations, that forms us. It forms our thinking. It forms our performance. It forms how we feel about ourselves. And I know that you've gotten a number of awards, including from the Center for Health Design and many other places, and have shown multiple times that by taking the physical environment and sort of intentionally paying attention to what it does, improvements in satisfaction, improvements in productivity, even improvements in safety, an important thing in healthcare and other places, and lower costs can happen. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you get into this, and what do you actually do to make that happen?
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, no, most definitely. The environment, and what I like to say is the environment really is a barrier potentially to us getting at our optimal performance, right? And to really reach optimal health. And we don't recognize a lot of times the environment really is a barrier for us to actually get to that full performance. So I didn't see that. I actually saw that as a medical social worker. I started in the field of social work, and my undergraduate degree is in social work. And as a medical social worker, as a practitioner, I saw that the environment, I was having conversations with my patients and their family members in a hallway, and I would get a much different reaction than if I sat in a quiet, calming room, that they would actually hear what I had to say and be able to absorb and understand that information. And so as a social worker, and kind of at the root, a core of what we do is we want to help people get to their optimal, right? And so I explored, after the social work, architecture and the degree of architecture. And I actually have a doctoral degree in architecture and behavior and culture. And so really looking at the role the environment was playing and the ability to overall kind of support the person in their being. So I think your Churchill comment at the beginning of this was really very pointed, because that is a lot of times what we do is we work from the inside of a space to understand what really is trying to occur, the relationships that you're trying to build, the enhancement and the support of the people that are working in that environment, and then building that environment to support that operations. And so many times we don't think about the operations first. We actually go specifically to, well, I'd like to build a building and I like to design and I want to pull all of this together, but we don't actually fully understand the role that we're trying to orchestrate within the space. And so a lot of that can happen in your own personal home, and thinking about the relationships and the activities that you want to have happen in your home, and being able to create that environment to really support those relationships.
Now, that's fantastic. I had the personal opportunity to watch you work closely with a brand new cancer center that wanted to become an optimal healing environment as it put it together. And so it was very clear that what you built into that, or helped them build into that, could instantly enhance well-being when they walked in, which, of course, when you have cancer, very, very scary condition. A lot of the treatments are scary, the imaging is scary, et cetera. But there was like a physical impact of that. And that was pretty amazing. But there was something else you did that I think is really, really relevant to how not just healthcare, but the work environment and even our home. And that is the way the team works together. And your combination of social work
Mm-hmm.
and architecture seems to me like the perfect thing to talk about. How do we get groups? How do we get social trust and integration better integrated? Can you talk a little bit about how you do that in both the work and the healthcare space?
Yes, most definitely. So teamwork is incredibly important, and especially today, the collaboration and connectivity that we need to build together is so important. And so, really, what we work to understand is what type of relationships. We now know that there's the hybrid conversations, right? So we're talking together remotely, but then also being able to include others within the conversation that are in person. So how do you build those relationships that really will enhance the eye-to-eye level conversation? So really thinking about spaces that allow for people to have eye level conversations, that intentionality between creating a space that really brings that that engagement of eye level, as well as shoulder to shoulder conversations. So, or having a physical barrier of a table can actually be a barrier and actually psychologically make you feel as though one is superior than the other. So thinking about even using a round table as opposed to a square table in community and work environments with staff members. So really, or even family members, right? Being able to really have that more, instead of developing a hierarchy, which is again one of those unspoken things that you wouldn't think a barrier of a table would be creating an issue, but it really does create a physical barrier between both your family member or your staff member.
Yeah. So we are, some of us, most of us, some places are now emerging from a really challenging time in which barriers to
Mm-hmm.
social connection have been huge.
Yes.
Social isolation, which we really wanted physical isolation, but, to prevent spread of the virus. But the consequence of that was the kind of social isolation that people had. And we have seen really a rising epidemic of not only social isolation, but also loneliness. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that this pandemic has had on those two different things and the differences between them?
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. I think it's really important to start with the root of the definition of what is social isolation. There's both the subjective and the objective isolation. The subjective is that component of feeling lonely, right? And the feeling of being alone. So there are times where people are maybe with others but they can still feel alone. But then the objective, which is actually what we have all experienced, is that physical separation that has occurred, which is that objective social isolation. And isolation occurs in different ways as well. It's layered. It starts with really a personal sense of isolation, right? And so if we think of personal isolation, again, the objective, I'm by myself, literally by myself. But how do I not feel isolated internally? And back to the optimal healing environments that we were working with is just how do you feel purposeful in your own life? And what are you personally contributing to life? But then the relational. And I think that this is the piece as we move forward and as we grow into the new normal of work relationships and family relationships, again, reigniting those opportunities to relationally build those relationships together. So having work relationships, family relationships, and having strong relationships there, physically being able to gather and bring folks together. But then there's the collective isolation. So this is where I feel some of the uprising of some of what we have seen within a feeling of belonging within a greater community, whether it's the work that you're doing as a whole within your company, or feeling a belonging of whether it's your church or your greater community within your organization, to be able to feel that collective connection. So that really isolation happens on three levels: personal, relational, and then the collective.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that loneliness and isolation are not the same thing.
Mm-mm.
and that there can be people who are physically isolated, and that can lead to loneliness. And I think the pandemic has done a lot of that,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But you can also get back together, which many of us are doing now, and sort of resetting, and still feel lonely.
Right.
Uh, so can tell us a little bit about what does a person need to do to mitigate the loneliness? Because that's the key issue here, isn't it? How can
Right.
we reset and re-engage and help alleviate loneliness for ourselves and others as we, reemerge from the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that it really is going to. The way that I've seen it is you really need to start with yourself, right? And it's the similar things of saying, put on your air mask first, right, when you're in the airplane. If and so this is something that you need to take care of yourself first, and really feel as though you have personal support and relationships with yourself, feeling healthy and well within yourself, and that understanding of that your core purpose and of life. And so maybe it's providing opportunities for you to surround your space with what your purpose, what you're passionate about, right? So
Mhm.
even in your internal work environment, thinking about what gives you inspiration in the morning, what brings you excited to come and do whatever you're doing in that day, whether it's whatever that activity is, what brings you an inspiration. And so pulling those items, and even they can be tokens that you place in your space that really invigorate you and recenter you to a point that you're feeling excited to kind of continue with the day. And so I think that that's where I would recommend folks to start, is thinking about what inspires them and what makes them feel purposeful in life.
Mhm. So essentially, start with what gives you joy, what you really enjoy, and has meaning and purpose for you. But then, what I hear you saying is, do it with others. Seek
Yes.
out others who are doing that, and whether it's your church that you
Right.
enjoy, or bird watching, or
Right.
hiking, or simply connecting around games and cards and things like that. If you enjoy that, find others to do it with. Would that be an
Most
accurate
definitely.
way to do
Yes.
that? You mentioned a bit about the collective issue of social isolation. And I know when we really get to know people as other people, deeply who they are, their human feelings, their desires, their loves, etc. This brings people closer together. But during the pandemic, we've seen a real division where people have been driven apart, maybe partly because of the lack of the ability to actually get together and be with other people and learn who they really are. And we've seen this manifest in many ways with, increasing hate, around different groups and races and things like that. I mean, is this an expression of the lack of isolation, and are there ways that we can actually reconnect with other people that maybe we feel are a little bit different or we don't like? I remember Daryl Davis, the African American black man who went into the Ku Klux Klan and said, "How can you hate me if you don't know me?" and actually got to know some of the folks there. And soon they began to like him, and they said, "Gee, that's a great question. I can't hate him anymore." And many of
Mhm.
them left. Do we need more of that to help heal these social divisions? That deep kind of connection around what's meaningful us across common humanity. Can you tell
Most
us a little bit about
definitely.
them?
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with you, Wayne, that and that's where it was really an aha for me to really see that we as a society are just lacking so much because we've been so physically isolated from everyone. When you start to look at it in those layers of saying, okay, collectively, I don't feel like I belong to anything anymore, right? And so how could I really reach across the aisle or reach across the lines and say, you know what, I really want to become part of these communities and better understand those communities. We all need communities. We're, as human beings, we are habitually, we work best together, and we need those identities and we need those relationships to really help us perpetuate ourselves into the future. So really looking at those an understanding and rooting deeper into our collective understanding of who we are and what we are proud of. And so being able to, I think, again, very visually be able to, even within your work environment or within your space, to be able to bring those recognitions of your community that you're a part of, and surrounding yourself with that, and being proud of that surrounding of those components that really make you who you are.
Yeah. I think fundamentally, love and belonging are key issues that cut across everybody everywhere. It's a basic human need. When I do visits, integrative health visits with patients, I try to get to know them. And a question that I always ask them is, what gives them meaning and purpose in life? What gives them joy? Why do they get up in the morning? Why do they want their health, for example? And we consistently get responses back that have to do with connecting to others, have to do with family and friends and spending time with them, and also giving back, altruism, social purpose, in which I'm doing something beyond just myself. Yes, put on your oxygen mask first, but then extend that oxygen mask to somebody else. Those are the common themes that cut across this. So are there ways that we can enhance that? I know people are now getting back into work, at least some, not all of us, unfortunately. But as more people get back into work, are there ways that we can embed this in our day-to-day work lives so that we can help facilitate healing of those social relationships?
Yes, most definitely. I think there, again, I would say on the collective and the relational piece of it within your work environment, I think that it's very important to rethink about the workspace, right? So the way of the future is folks are going to be working at home a good portion of time. And then also they're going to come to the office for a more collaborative and relational development component, as well as understanding the community that you're working with. So the importance of building those office spaces intentionally and working in the new environments intentionally focused around collaboration and making it easy to collaborate, making it easy to have a casual conversation, pulling up a chair. And so I think that one of the things that we talk a lot about is being ready, always thinking about the unexpected guest that's coming over, right? Making it very simple to say, this is where I would have that conversation, and making it easy to slide into those conversations. They always have an unexpected guest coming in, and you don't want to have to shuffle around papers or whatever, that nope, this is where you're going to sit and we're going to have a casual conversation. And just that understanding and that intentionality of designing a space to really have those easy conversations seamlessly from online to in person.
I like that idea of an unexpected guest, sort of like having the chair for Elijah, right, to come at dinner. But if you expected, if someone were to knock on the door tomorrow or the next hour, if you said, "Oh, I already have a place for them. Come on in. Here's a place. Sit down. There's a way we can connect now." And if that was set up ahead of time, is what you're telling me, create your environment to do that, then it becomes an easy thing then to fall into the behavior that fosters that social connection. I used to, when I came in, I've been working at home a lot too. I'm not now, I'm actually in my office, but I used to come in, work in the office, I'd go home, and then I'd try to find time when I could get out and exercise and walk and be in nature and that type of thing. And now I'm finding, and I know you've written about this, and we actually did an article together about this, of combining those things, of continuing to do our work, sometimes more effectively, more creatively. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that happens by doing things like walking meetings or by having the meetings outside. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, most definitely. Well, we know that the pandemic has created us all to be hyper clean freaks, right? And so we have a lot of cleaning product that has impacted the environment too that we're in. And so I think that a part of being able to go outside and walk in nature if you think about the internal environment, as much as as an architect, I love internal spaces, but when you walk outside, the expansiveness you feel and the openness you feel, the limitlessness that you feel when you're outside is so wonderful to be able to share that with others. And that has actually been proven 80% more productive when you're actually outside and walking than and more creative when you're outside than you are when you're inside trying to be creative. So being able to kind of extend the hand to someone and say, you know what, when we do this a lot in our office is we'll just say, let's go do this as a walking meeting. And we just walk and talk, and the ability to kind of, again, breathe in the clean air outside of all of that. But then also really, it does automatically reduce stress. Just a view outside to nature reduces blood pressure, we know. So, this reduces your stress levels, and it just really opens those conversations and opportunities to really have a great conversation with somebody.
Yeah. So do you think that, the government has said they would like to continue to do hybrid type of working, work from home, part-time and coming in? The old mindset was, oh, no, you're not going to be productive if you stay home. But what you're saying, I think, is that you're saying that actually the opposite has been discovered. Actually,
Right.
People are more productive. They're more creative if they can actually control their own environment. And so recommending that people actually do this kind of hybrid work if they have the opportunity to do that, is that something you would suggest for people?
Oh, most definitely. I think that, but the important piece of it is you have to be intentional, right? And you have to really understand what how the rhythm of your day is, right? And so being able to really take an understanding of taking time for yourself and saying, okay, we need to wake in this manner, and then I need to have some heads down work that's uninterrupted, and that's great to do that at home. But then really being intentional about coming into the office and having those relationships and work with your colleagues on collaborative project work. And so really being intentional about scheduling that, making the team available, and understanding on your internal team. We've done this at our office where we actually have a schedule board of who's going to be in the office when, right? So you could visually see when others are going to be there. So you could also plan your time if you need to collaborate with others at that time. It's really important that we build some intentionality over it. And it is really providing, I think, everybody the ability to control their day in a way that we haven't had that ability to control our day and really make choices on a regular basis to not, I don't like to say work-life balance, but work-life choices, right? So we make choices of when we work and when we're living in our family and doing that work, and not trying to necessarily balance it, but being intentional and being more productive and more collaborative when we need to be collaborative, and making those changes from in-person to remote as well.
How do you maintain those boundaries, though? I mean, if you're working at home and that's also where your life is, isn't that difficult for some people to, maybe it's not work-life balance, but I still think of it that way. But it's work-life boundaries. So what you're saying, I think I hear you saying, is that you need to structure that. Correct. So that those boundaries are clear, even though the physical boundary may not be there anymore.
Correct. Most definitely. I've seen a lot of folks that have actually had their workspace, because of limitations with physical space, their workspace is within their bedroom. Right. And so one of the things that if you have limitations that you have to work within your bedroom, think about the ritual of getting out of bed, making the bed, leaving your bed, having breakfast in your kitchen, and then coming to work in your bedroom, but it's set up in a different way, right? And so building that intentionality of saying, yes, it's okay to work in my bedroom, but I'm coming to work in a different manner than just sitting in my bed from waking up in the morning. I'm really building that intentionality around that process.
Yeah, so it's not just creating a different space. It's really creating and utilizing space and behavior to create a different mental space.
Exactly.
In those areas, so the inner and the outer.
Exactly.
This is great. Well, what else would you like to tell us here? I know you have a company, a consulting company that helps people figure out how to improve their productivity, and you work with a number of organizations that do that. But is there anything else you'd like to tell us about that company? How do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about this?
Sure. Again, our company, Envia.com, happy to have folks. We work mostly with hospitals and healthcare organizations, but many different organizations to really help remove physical barriers from their ability to really perform at their optimum. And so, as Wayne mentioned, we've worked with multitude of different groups. An example of the oncology facility and being able to really support that space and to be able to support the teams as they move through those facilities.
Great. So we've got a couple questions. I want to, first of all, thank you for this. I'm going to stop asking the questions here and let some of our viewers ask questions. And so I'm going to ask Cooper, our moderator, if he would just sort of pop them up there. There's a couple questions here that have come in. One of them is what inspires you and gives you life? So that's an interesting question. What inspires you and gives you life? That's a great one. I should have asked that at the beginning myself. Thank you for that question.
For me, what inspires me is really contributing to the conversation of really helping others. And how can we, what inspires me is to really give folks the tools to be able to help themselves and to be able to recognize that. And that's really what inspires me, and the work and the research and contributing to that additional research in the field to be able to say, there's a scientific reason why these things work. And that we can really support each other, and we all have these tools. Our bodies can heal themselves. We just have to give that potential and opportunity to do that. And I think a lot of times we lose sight of that understanding.
Great, thank you very much. That was great. So we have a question that's come in. Well,
I get to ask you
the other question, and just talking about how we optimize our own healing and the different ways, the different smorgasbord that of options that are available is really what inspires me. So here's another question from Sarah Shaw. How can social isolation affect your physical health? That's an excellent question. We are not separate mind and body, right? So how does the society and social isolation impact your physical health?
Yeah, so actually, there's a lot of research in regards to this. And folks that are socially isolation and even loneliness are 2 times more likely to miss days of work. The reduced productivity, reduced quality, as well as increased turnover by 2 times more. The other aspects of their physical health is obesity and chronic disease. So some of those initial markers of blood pressure and other components that would, again, result in this social isolation. So anxiety and stress as well. Yeah, what are your additional thoughts?
No, well, I think there's been studies definitely showing that isolation, and especially loneliness, which you indicate is different than isolation, it increases things like inflammation, for example, which we know affect all kinds of chronic illnesses and also increase pain. So if you're in chronic pain, asking the question about social support, isolation, loneliness is not an irrelevant question if you want to do that. The other thing, there was a very famous long-term Harvard Health study in which they looked at all kinds of factors related to high quality and long life, so longevity, who lived the best and who lived the longest. And one of the main factors, actually, even beyond things like smoking and diet and other things that we kind of normally think of, was meaning and purpose. The very thing that you talked about, the fact that people were engaged in something that they lived for, that they had joy, that gave back to other people. And very often that meaning and purpose was integrated with in the social context in those areas. So that can specifically affect your physical health and even your longevity.
Most definitely.
Okay. Here we got one more question. What can we do at home to improve our homes to make them more of a healing space? Wonderful question. Thank you, Jennifer.
Awesome. Yes. So to make our spaces a more healing space, I think that one of the components is really thinking of the activities of your day, and thinking about how those daily activities could be supported by whether you take breakfast at sunrise where you can see the sunrise, right? And really bringing nature into your environment if you can, and positioning yourself in that way to really make it less distracting potentially. And so one of the things would be decluttering some of your space so it's not as disruptive. Now, some people actually like that clutter makes them feel more comfortable, right? And so they need to have that that surrounding and understanding. So really, again, back to your own person, everyone has their own personal understanding of health and healing, and personal wholeness that you need to bring into that. But the really creating an environment that allows you to move through your daily life and that supports your ability to work from the beginning when you sleep is very important. So creating a healing space that allows you to sleep well, having the dark environment, sound and noise, as well as there's a lot of research in regards to color use. So using more of a blue tone of wall coloring in your space to allow for those soothing nights and evenings to get the, if you need to have sound or music to help you go to sleep or noises. There's a lot of research that shows that a constant level of noise is actually better than the jarring slamming of a door or dropping of something. That if there are those jarring noises of traffic noise or whatever, that having those decibel levels of the room, having those white noises to cancel that out, to even out the tone of the sounds for sleeping is very important, and as well as agitation. So thinking about, again, all aspects of your environment can be impacted. As beings, we have all these different senses that takes in all of this at all times, and sometimes we're cognizant of it and other times we're not. So really thinking through those little triggers that can really impact you in a way that can be disruptive to healing. I will just add one more thing, that stress is the primary barrier to healing and health, right? And so a lot of what I would focus on and within your home is what are your stress triggers, right? And so I think that that's where I would probably have started with this whole kind of conversation, but really thinking about that.
That's great. That's the first time I've heard that clutter actually might be soothing. Maybe it is for some people, but I find for most people, it's probably not so soothing. It actually creates some stress. So, clutter, sleep, paying attention to your sleep environment, color, the indoor-outdoor component, perhaps plants, for example, are an important area. Make sure you're in a safe environment so that you don't feel like you're on edge, I think is another thing for some people in those areas. And then this sort of constant soothing sound. I live on the East Coast right now, and the 17-year cicadas, Brood X, are out right now, and we have this constant noise going on, which if it irritates you, then it can create stress. But if I saw a man walking down the street the other day and he was meditating, you could tell he was just enjoying the hum of this constant spaceship sound from some cicadas in those areas. So I think you and I are actually on a panel in the fall talking about clutter and talking about how to address issues of hoarding, of clutter, of messiness and calmness and that type of thing, and its impact on your health. And so I look forward to doing that with you. And for those of you that are interested in that and on this in this FaceTime Live, stay tuned. You can see my website, drwaynejonas.com, or Dr. McAllister's website at envia.com. And stay tuned for that, and we'll have more information on that when that's coming out.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Larissa. I really appreciate this conversation. It's been fantastic. And I hope that those listening have gotten a lot out of it. I certainly have.
Great. Thank you, Wayne. It was a pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.